At the heart of the Marian prophecies, there is a message that has endured throughout the centuries, one that continues to resonate in the hearts of the faithful and in the echoes of the history of the Catholic Church. The Virgin Mary, through her appearances in places like Fatima, has left messages that invite us to deep reflection, constant prayer, and spiritual preparation in times of crisis. One of those messages, which has captured the attention of millions of believers, is the so-called prophecy of the Black Pope, which has been attributed to the Fatima revelations. What does this prophecy really mean? Will it be fulfilled? How is it connected to the events we experience in the present? This enigma continues to be a topic of debate among theologians, prophecy scholars, and laymen alike. On April 21st, 2025, the world was shaken by the death of Pope Francis, a fact that did not go unnoticed, especially for those who have closely followed the teachings of the Virgin Mary and the predictions of Fatima. At this crucial time, the resurgence of the Black Pope prophecy has raised even more questions. According to the words attributed to the Virgin of Fatima, a pope of African origin would be the figure who would mark a transcendental change within the Church. This event, which has been predicted for more than a century, has become the center of many speculations, theories, and for some, a sign that we are closer to an unknown and challenging future for humanity and the Church. But will this prophecy really come true? The idea of a Black Pope has generated different interpretations. Some see him as a figure of unity, symbolizing the access of African peoples to the leadership of the Church. Others interpret it as a drastic change in papal leadership, possibly related to the end times predicted in Scripture. Regardless of how it is seen, the truth is that the appearance of this figure, according to the prophecies, would mark the beginning of a period of profound transformation in the Church and in the entire world. This type of message not only has theological implications, but also spiritual and social ones. It is impossible to ignore the significance of the Black Pope's prophecy in the current context. We live in a world where political tensions, economic crises, and religious divisions seem to be at their peak. Marian prophecies like that of Fatima call us to be vigilant and prepared for the times to come. At a time when many are wondering about the future of the Church and the role of the Pope, the figure of the Black Pope is presented as a mystery that could mark a before and after in history. The Virgin Mary, in her message, has always urged us to constant prayer and spiritual reflection, especially in times of uncertainty. It has taught us that true peace can only be found in the hearts of those who surrender with faith and devotion. In this sense, the prophecy of the Black Pope can be seen not only as a harbinger of change, but as an invitation to redouble our efforts in prayer and commitment to God. Before we continue exploring this prophecy, I want to make a call to you. If this topic resonates in your heart and you want to know more about the prophecies of the Virgin Mary and how these revelations impact our spiritual life, I invite you to subscribe to our channel. Every week, we bring you new content on these profound topics that affect our faith and our understanding of the world today. By subscribing, you will be aware of every video and reflection that we share with all our followers. Your support is essential for this mission to continue, and we want you to be part of our community of believers who seek to understand the signs of the times. I also invite you to leave your comments and share your thoughts. What do you think about the Black Pope prophecy? Do you think we are close to seeing this prediction come true? We want to know your opinion. Also, if you feel in your heart that there is something or someone we should pray for, feel free to leave your intentions in the comments. We pray together as a community for all those who need divine comfort, guidance, and protection. Together we can strengthen our faith and prepare for the times to come. I am from Spain, and here in our land we face great spiritual challenges, but also a great opportunity to renew our faith and commitment to the Virgin Mary. I'm convinced that Marian prophecies are a beacon of light in the midst of darkness, and that we must listen to their message with humility and reverence. Now, I invite you to stay with us to delve deeper into the mystery of the Black Pope's prophecy, its possible implications, and what the Virgin of Fatima wants to teach us at this historical moment. History is being written, and each of us has a role to play. Prayer is our refuge and our strength. Let's not let the world distract us from what really matters. Through prayer and reflection, we can grow closer to God and live with purpose. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. This is just the beginning of a spiritual journey we are taking together. I thank you deeply for being here and for being part of this community of faith. On July 13, 1917, the Virgin Mary revealed 3 secrets to the 3 little shepherds in Fatima, Portugal. These secrets, transmitted in a context of war and hopelessness, were part of a divine message that touched the hearts of humanity, making an urgent call to conversion, prayer, and sacrifice. While the first 2 secrets focused on visions of a great war and devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, the 3rd secret of Fatima was the one that generated the most mystery, and which, even decades after its revelation, continues to be the subject of debate and reflection within the Church and among the faithful. This 3rd secret was finally revealed by the Vatican in 2000 after years of speculation and popular concern about its content. It was said that the message held great symbolic and spiritual power, and that its revelation was intended to prepare us for future events of enormous significance for humanity and the Catholic Church. Pope John Paul II, in authorizing its publication, mentioned that the message contained a deeply spiritual vision about the direction of the future of the Church and the destiny of the world, and that, although it was not easy to understand at the time, its relevance would become increasingly evident as time went by. The content of the 3rd secret was described as an apocalyptic vision. It showed a pope, dressed in white, walking through a ruined city, surrounded by corpses and facing terrible suffering. This pope, who is generally interpreted as a symbolic figure, would be the image of a leader who faces suffering and persecution in defense of the faith. The details of the vision point to a scenario of destruction and martyrdom, elements that refer to the difficult times that the Church could go through, especially in the face of external threats that loom over the Christian faith. The interpretation of this 3rd secret has been the subject of multiple studies and various theories. For some, the vision of the suffering Pope relates to the physical and spiritual attacks that the Church would face, especially in modern times, where religious persecution, secularism, and indifference toward God seem to be increasingly prominent. In this sense, the Pope seen in the vision could not be a single individual, but rather a representation of the Pope as a figure of unity and resistance in the face of the adversities of the Christian faith. One of the most common and accepted interpretations is that the 3rd secret of Fatima refers to the attack suffered by Pope John Paul II on May 13, 1981, precisely on the same day that the Virgin had appeared to the 3 children in Fatima. During the attack, the Pope was seriously wounded but survived, and many have interpreted this incident as the fulfillment of part of the vision shown to the children in 1917. John Paul II himself, reflecting on the attack, stated that he considered it was the Virgin who had saved him, deflecting the bullet that almost killed him. This event strengthened the relationship of the Virgin with the popes and reaffirmed the importance of the message of Fatima in the life of the Church. Over the years, the interpretation of the 3rd secret has evolved, and various Mariology experts have proposed different readings based on the events that unfolded after its revelation. One of the most recent approaches points to the connection between the vision of Fatima and the crises that the contemporary church is going through. In this sense, the persecution described in the third secret can be seen as a warning about the internal challenges of the church, such as the crisis of faith, the fight against materialism, scandals within the clergy, and the loss of credibility in the face of new generations. Furthermore, the devastation shown in the vision could be interpreted as a symbol of the loss of moral and spiritual influence that the Church has experienced in some contexts of the modern world. It is important to note that the Virgin, in her appearances to the children of Fatima, always emphasized the need for prayer and repentance. In his words, he invited humanity to pray for the peace of the world and to surrender to the love of God, with the promise that devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary would be a safe refuge in times of tribulation. Therefore, the third secret must not only be seen as an apocalyptic vision of suffering, but also as a call to spiritual strengthening and conversion of the human heart towards God, who is the only true hope to overcome the trials ahead. Throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, various pontiffs have referred to the message of Fatima and have called for action to fulfill the Virgin's requests. Pope Francis, who visited Fatima in 2017 on the occasion of the centenary of the apparitions, consecrated the world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, following the mandate given by the Virgin to children in 1917. This consecration, which has been repeated on various occasions, is seen by many as an act of faith and obedience to the message of Fatima, seeking divine protection in the midst of an increasingly convulsed world. The interpretation of the third secret has also been a topic of debate within the Church. Some argue that the Fatima prophecies have already been partially fulfilled with the events of World War II, the collapse of the communist regimes, and the fall of the Berlin Wall. Others, however, maintain that the vision of the suffering Pope is a warning about events that are yet to occur, and that the Church must be prepared to face new persecutions and challenges. The third secret of Fatima, when revealed, not only left a message of warning, but also an invitation to hope. Despite the difficulties and suffering that could ensue, the Virgin Mary has reminded us that faith in God and His love will lead us to final victory over evil. Today, many people feel that this message remains deeply relevant, not only in the context of the Church, but also on the global scene, where social, political, and religious tensions continue to grow. For many believers, the mystery of the third secret of Fatima remains a source of constant reflection. As we watch events unfold in the world, it appears that elements of prophecy may be beginning to manifest in ways that only time will be able to confirm. Now, I want to know your opinion on this topic. What do you think about the third secret of Fatima and its interpretation in current times? Do you think the prophecy is closer to being fulfilled? I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Throughout history, prophecies involving the Catholic Church have captured the attention of thousands of people, both believers and skeptics. One of the most fascinating and mysterious is the prophecy of the Black Pope, a prediction that has caused a stir, especially in religious circles, but also in those interested in apocalyptic theories and the future of the Church. This figure, which seems to anticipate the arrival of a pope with an unexpected origin and of great relevance for the times to come, has been interpreted in various ways, and its implications are much deeper than many imagine. The prophecy of the Black Pope does not come from a single source, but is based on a series of visions, texts, and traditions that have accumulated over the centuries. One of the most influential texts is that of the apparitions of the Virgin of Fatima in Portugal, where it was indirectly mentioned that a pope would be a key point in recent times. Although a Black Pope is not explicitly mentioned, many interpret that this title refers to a figure who, due to his actions and origin, will mark a transcendental change in the Church and the world. The term Black Pope has generated a great deal of speculation. Some interpret it literally as a pope of African origin, while others see it as a metaphor to describe a pope who will bring with him a radically different approach than the Church has had until now. This interpretation is even more intriguing when you consider the fact that Pope Francis, elected in 2013, has been seen by many as a leader attempting to renew the Church, moving it away from old structures and opening doors to new possibilities. This has led some to see Pope Francis as the precursor to an even more transformative figure. The prophecy of the Black Pope is not only related to the figure of a new pope, but also to the events that will surround his arrival. According to some interpretations, the appearance of this pope will be related to the fulfillment of divine judgment, especially in times of crisis. Some predict that the Black Pope will arrive in the midst of a situation of global chaos, with wars, natural disasters, economic crises, and a growing distance from faith in many parts of the world. The arrival of this pope, according to the prophecies, would be a sign that the end times are near, which further fuels the expectation about what this leader would represent. The implications of the Black Pope prophecy are profound. For some, this figure is seen as the last pope, the leader who will close a cycle within the Catholic Church and usher in a new era, characterized by major changes in the structure of the Church and in the relationship between the Vatican and the outside world. This interpretation, however, raises many questions about the future of the Church and its ability to adapt to a rapidly changing world. How can the Church remain relevant in such a divided and secular world? Will the Black Pope be a figure who will restore unity in times of fragmentation, or will he be a leader who will deepen divisions? One of the most popular interpretations of the prophecy is that the Black Pope will be a pope who represents a change of direction for the Church, moving away from conservative traditions and adopting a more radical stance in the face of global challenges. This figure could be seen as someone who is willing to confront humanity's biggest problems, such as poverty, war, climate change, and social injustices. But he could also be seen as a pope who will address internal issues in the Church, such as abuse scandals, the crisis of faith among young people, and the lack of priestly vocations. Another crucial aspect of this prophecy is the symbolism of the color black. In many cultures, the color black has connotations of mystery, power, and transformation. In the context of the Catholic Church, the color black could symbolize the challenge to old power structures and the renewal necessary to survive in a modern, globalized world. The Black Pope could then be a figure who does not conform to the status quo and who seeks to radically change things, which would make him both an admired and controversial leader. Although this prophecy has been mentioned on different occasions, it has never been completely accepted or confirmed by the Catholic Church. In fact, official Vatican sources have been very cautious in approaching the issue of prophecies and have emphasized that the Christian faith should not depend on private visions or speculative interpretations. However, this has not stopped many people from continuing to reflect on the meaning of the prophecy and its possible fulfillment. In the current context, Pope Francis has faced a number of significant challenges, both within the Church and in the world at large. Its focus on mercy, interfaith dialogue, and social justice has been highly influential, but has also drawn criticism from those who feel the Church is losing its traditional path. In the midst of these tensions, the figure of the Black Pope appears as a symbol of an uncertain future, but full of possibilities and challenges. Some believe that in the coming years we will see the arrival of this mysterious figure, while others think that his appearance is just a matter of religious interpretation. As the world faces increasingly complex problems, from economic crises to wars and natural disasters, the idea of a leader who can guide humanity into a new spiritual and social era is attractive to many. The Black Pope as a prophecy invites us to reflect on the role of the Church in the future of humanity, on the changes that are coming, and on what we can expect from a religious figure who could be radically different from everything we have known until now. Some think that the Black Pope will represent a new hope for humanity, a leader who will be able to bring people together and guide them towards reconciliation and peace. Others, however, believe that this figure will be darker, that it will bring with it an era of uncertainty and struggle in which the traditional values of the Church will be challenged. What is clear is that the Black Pope prophecy remains a question of great interest and mystery, one that will continue to be debated as we look forward to the future. What do you think about the Black Pope prophecy? Do you think it will be fulfilled in the coming years? Share your opinion and experience with us in the comments. The prophecy of the Black Pope is one of the most disturbing and debated within the contemporary religious and prophetic context. Throughout the centuries, the Catholic Church has been subject to prophecies that predict the future of the institution and humanity. However, the figure of the Black Pope is especially intriguing due to his complex relationship with the history of the Church and the tensions that this interpretation has generated between believers and skeptics. To understand this concept, it is crucial to consider both the historical and cultural context that has shaped its interpretation. Firstly, the notion of a Black Pope is closely linked to the famous prophecy of St. Malachi, a 12th century Irish monk, who, according to some versions, would have predicted papacies until the end of time. This prophecy contains a list of popes, each of whom is assigned a brief symbolic description. Although the authenticity of the prophecy has been questioned by many scholars, its influence on the perception of the future of the Church is undeniable. The last of the descriptions assigned to a pope is that of Peter the Roman, who, according to popular interpretation, would be the last pope, and his papacy would coincide with a time of tribulation and desolation for the Church. Within this narrative, the Black Pope appears as a mysterious and dark figure, often associated with the idea of a pope of African origin or unusual characteristics, in contrast to the traditional image of the Pope of Rome. Although there is no explicit mention in traditional prophecies of a Black Pope, this figure has emerged as a symbol that refers to a radical change in the structure and identity of the Church. A change that could be linked to the end of times or a deep internal crisis. Historically, the Catholic Church has faced several leadership crises and significant changes in its structure. Over the centuries, it has experienced numerous reforms, splits, and controversies that have led the figure of the Pope to become a symbol of stability, but also of internal tensions. In the 16th century, for example, the Protestant Reformation, led by figures such as Martin Luther, challenged papal authority, resulting in a significant rift within the Church. Throughout the following centuries, the Church had to deal with the challenges imposed by secularizing movements, the expansion of the sciences, and social and political changes that threatened its global influence. The figure of the Black Pope can also be seen as a reflection of internal tensions within the Church. For centuries, discussions about the role of the Church in world politics, its relationship with secular power, and its confrontations with other religions have created an atmosphere full of uncertainty. The figure of a pope, who not only leads the Church, but also represents a kind of radical renewal or transformation, can be interpreted as a warning that the Church will have to adapt to changing times or face an existential crisis. Furthermore, culturally, the idea of the Black Pope is linked to the increasing globalization and diversity of the Catholic Church. In recent years, there has been a significant increase in the presence of cardinals and bishops from Africa, Asia, and Latin America. This trend reflects the growing influence of the Third World in ecclesiastical affairs, and many see it as an indication that the upcoming papal election could bring about a significant change in the geographical representation of the Church. A pope of African origin, or a pope who comes from a different culture, would be a symbolic break with tradition, and an indication that the Church is being called to a new stage in its history. However, the interpretation of the Black Pope as a figure symbolizing profound change in the Church has also generated concern and skepticism among those who fear that this change represents a departure from traditional orthodoxy. Over the centuries, the Church has been seen as a bastion of tradition and stability, and any attempt to alter its structure or doctrine is seen by some as a threat to the authenticity of the Catholic faith. One of the main tensions that arises around the Black Pope is concern about the role of the Church in the future of Christianity. The world is changing rapidly, and with it, expectations about how the Church should act to remain relevant. Some believe that the figure of the Black Pope could be a sign that the Church needs to face new challenges, such as secularization, the decline of faith in some parts of the world, and the rise of new forms of spirituality. Others, however, fear that any change in the structure of the Church could weaken its influence and move away from traditional principles. Throughout history, the figure of the Pope has been the subject of multiple interpretations and expectations. Some see him as a divinely inspired leader whose role is to guide the Church in times of crisis. Others, however, perceive him as a human figure, subject to the limitations and defects of earthly power. In this context, the figure of the Black Pope not only reflects fear and hope about the future of the Church, but also the constant struggle to find a balance between tradition and modernity. In conclusion, the analysis of the prophecy of the Black Pope requires not only a detailed examination of ancient prophecies and texts, but also a reflection on the historical and cultural tensions that have marked the history of the Church. While some believe that the Black Pope represents imminent and necessary change, others see him as a threat to the stability of the faith. This figure, although controversial, remains a powerful symbol of internal struggles and expectations about the future of the Church. What do you think about the interpretation of the Black Pope prophecy? Do you think the Church is facing a profound transformation? Comment below with your opinion and share your thoughts with the community. On April 21, 2025, the world was shaken by news that quickly made global headlines: the death of Pope Francis, an event that for many seemed inevitable, but for others marked a momentous turn in the history of the Catholic Church. The Pope, who during his pontificate had been a tireless defender of peace, mercy, and social justice, left a legacy that, despite his death, continued to resonate in the hearts of millions of faithful around the world. Pope Francis, who assumed the papacy in 2013, was a controversial and admired figure at the same time. His progressive approaches, especially on issues of immigration, poverty, and the environment, positioned him as a key leader for the 21st century Church. However, his death not only meant the end of a pontificate, but also opened the door to a series of speculations, many of them fueled by theories about a prophecy that has circulated for centuries: the prophecy of the Black Pope. The Black Pope prophecy. The Black Pope prophecy is one of the most intriguing and mysterious predictions circulating within the world of the Catholic Church. This prediction, although not officially accepted by the Church, has been mentioned by various scholars and visionaries throughout history. In general terms, the prophecy states that, before the end of time, the Church would be governed by a pope of African origin, known as the Black Pope. This pope would be a key figure in the apocalyptic events that would mark the end of an era, according to the interpretation of many faithful and experts. Although Pope Francis was not African, his death and the context of his pontificate have generated speculation about the possibility that the next pope could fulfill this part of the prophecy. The connection between his death and the growing geopolitical, economic, and social tension in the world has been a source of discussion among those who look for signs of the end of times in current events. The context of the death of Pope Francis. On April 21st, 2025, the news of Pope Francis' death was met with shock and sadness around the world. While his health had been a recurring topic during the last few years of his life, especially after his intestinal surgery in 2021, the news was still shocking to the global community. The Pope, who had already partially renounced his responsibilities, especially regarding international travel due to his health, never ceased to be a central figure for the Church. The context of his death was also marked by a series of global events that seemed to predict a change in the course of history. The growing tension in the Middle East, the global economic crisis, and internal struggles within the Catholic Church were just some of the factors that created a scenario in which the figure of Pope Francis, as the world leader of the Church, seemed increasingly isolated. This disconnection between the hopes of many of the world's Catholics and the reality of his pontificate was something that made the Pope's death take on a new dimension in the imagination of the faithful. Spiritual connections to the Black Pope prophecy. Since the death of Pope Francis, many have turned to the prophecy of the Black Pope to try to understand the meaning of his passing. Some believe that his death was a harbinger of the arrival of an African Pope, as mentioned in the prophecy. In this context, the figure of the Black Pope not only refers to the race of the future Pope, but is interpreted as a representation of a radical change in the direction of the Church. This interpretation could mean a profound renewal in the ecclesiastical structure, a return to the roots of the primitive Church, or even a preview of the end of times. The future of the papacy. In the wake of Francis' death, many questions arose about the future of the Church. Will he be the next pope elected in such a tense and divided environment? Will this be the time for radical change within the Vatican, as some predict? The prophecy of the Black Pope, which has circulated in esoteric and theological circles, seems to point out the need for a figure who can confront the difficulties and challenges of the Church in an increasingly globalized and secularized world. The election of an African Pope, or even a completely different figure, could symbolize a break with the past and an opening towards an uncertain future. The arrival of a pope who is not only a transitional figure, but who has the power to lead the Church in times of crisis, could have a profound impact on the spirituality of Catholics and the direction of the Church globally. Coincidences and paradoxes. The death of Francisco and the prophecy. The coincidences between the death of Francis and the interpretations of the Black Pope's prophecy have not gone unnoticed. At the time of his death, many Catholics and theologians began to see a pattern of events that matched the prophetic narrative. A pope who, while an admired world leader, also faced great challenges internally in the Church and beyond. His death, at a time of growing political and social uncertainty, seemed to underline the void left by the figure of the Pope in times of crisis. It's hard not to see these coincidences as more than just coincidences. Many believe that the death of Pope Francis and the speculation about the Black Pope are nothing more than a sign of the times, a reminder that the Catholic Church and the world at large are entering a phase of profound change. While some see this as an opportunity for spiritual renewal, others interpret it as a warning that apocalyptic events are about to unfold. The world reaction to the death of Pope Francis. The global response to the death of Pope Francis also reflects the impact that his figure had on contemporary society. World leaders, from politicians to religious figures of various faiths, expressed their sadness at his departure. Social media was flooded with messages of condolence, while media outlets conducted extensive coverage of the events surrounding his death and funeral. This reaction not only reflects respect for him, but also the collective awareness that his death could mark the end of an era. The Black Pope prophecy, which many have interpreted as a harbinger of change and transformation within the Church, has become an integral part of the narrative surrounding the end of his papacy. The legacy of Pope Francis. Francis's legacy is complex. but there is no doubt that his influence on the Church and the world will be remembered. As a pope who sought to bring the Church closer to the problems of the contemporary world, his death could be seen as the closing of a chapter in the history of the Catholic Church. However, the coming change, represented in the prophecy of the Black Pope, could usher in a new era. What is certain is that the death of Pope Francis has left a deep mark on the hearts of millions of people around the world. As the Vatican prepares to elect a new pope, speculation about the Black Pope prophecy will continue to grow. Will the next pope be a figure that fits this prophecy? Only time will tell, but what is clear is that the Catholic Church and the entire world are at a historical crossroads. What do you think about the connection between the passing of Pope Francis and the prophecy of the Black Pope? Do you think this prediction will come true in the near future? Leave us your thoughts in the comments. The Fatima prophecy has been a topic of fascination and speculation since the Virgin Mary in 1917 revealed 3 secrets to 3 little Portuguese shepherds. Over the years, the details of these secrets have been subject to multiple interpretations. However, one of the aspects that has most intrigued the faithful and experts is the third secret, which was published by the Vatican in 2000, but whose interpretation continues to be a matter of debate. One of the most surprising and controversial theories that has emerged as a result of this third secret is the possibility that the prophecy refers to an African pope, a pope whose origin would be linked to the African continent. The supposed African pope has been a figure discussed in religious and prophetic circles for decades. According to the defenders of this theory, the Fatima prophecy could be alluding to the arrival of a pope of African race who would play a crucial role in the end times. This idea has been widely discussed and in many cases has been rejected by some theologians and ecclesiastical authorities who consider it to be too radical an interpretation. However, what is particularly interesting is the fact that this theory has gained traction in recent years, especially due to certain events and dynamics in the Catholic Church. To understand how this theory arose, it is important to remember the historical context in which the Fatima prophecy was made. In 1917, when the Virgin appeared to the 3 shepherds in Portugal, the world was in the midst of one of the most devastating wars in history, the First World War. The Virgin Mary gave warnings about the future of humanity, including the need for conversion and the importance of praying for peace. However, one of the secrets also spoke of the persecution of the Church, which many interpreted as a warning about the times of tribulation that would come for the Christian religion. In this context, the figure of the African Pope has been seen by some as a possible response to these difficult times. It is argued that a pope of African origin could be the leader the Church would need in times of increasing secularism, global conflicts, and the need for a change of direction within the ecclesiastical hierarchy. One of the key points of this theory is the observation that the Catholic Church is experiencing a process of globalization. At a time when Europe's ecclesiastical leadership is being questioned, some believe the arrival of an African pope could be a sign that the Church is adapting to the times and that the Vatican is seeking a leadership figure who better represents the global Catholic community, particularly the growing population of faithful in Africa. Since the 20th century, the Catholic Church has seen a significant increase in the number of faithful in Africa. Today, Africa is one of the continents with the largest number of Catholics, and the influence of the Catholic Church on the continent continues to expand. In this sense, some interpret that the African Pope could be the fruit of this growing Catholic presence in Africa, representing not only the Catholics of the continent, but also a church that needs to adapt to the reality of the 21st century. But beyond numbers and demographics, the figure of the African Pope could have a much deeper meaning. The history of the Church has been marked by leaders who have come from different parts of the world and who have represented various aspects of the Christian faith. From St. Peter, the first Pope, to Pope Francis, whose election was seen as a symbolism of closeness to the most humble peoples of Latin America, the Church has shown a capacity to renew itself through its leaders. In this sense, an African Pope could symbolize a spiritual rebirth for a Church that needs to return to its roots of humility and service. However, the idea of an African Pope is not just an idealistic concept. The social, political, and economic realities of Africa also play a fundamental role in shaping this theory. Africa is a continent marked by poverty, armed conflicts, political crises, and lack of development. Despite this, Africa has also been a place of deep spirituality, with a vibrant Christian faith that continues to grow despite difficulties. A pope of African origin could be seen as a leader who brings with him the experience of living on a continent full of challenges, but also hope, and could bring a fresh vision on how the Church can address these problems on a global level. Furthermore, an African pope could be a symbol of reconciliation at a time when the Catholic Church faces several internal challenges. The sexual abuse crisis, financial scandals, and declining mass attendance in many parts of the world have undermined the faith of the faithful in church leadership. An African pope could be seen as a figure of moral authority who offers new hope to restore the credibility of the Church. Despite the theories surrounding this prophecy, there are also critical voices that suggest that this interpretation is far from being correct. Some argue that the African Pope is a modern construct, created by those seeking to interpret the secrets of Fatima through a contemporary lens. According to these critics, the prophecy should not be read as a literal prediction about the Pope's ethnicity, but rather as a symbol of the spiritual struggle that the Church faces in current times. Regardless of whether the figure of the African Pope is an accurate interpretation of the Fatima prophecy or not, the truth is that the debate is still alive. The arrival of a Pope of African origin, whether by election or historical circumstances, would represent a significant change for the Catholic Church. In any case, the Fatima prophecy remains a profound mystery that continues to be interpreted in various ways, and only time will tell if this vision will be fulfilled or if the Church will take a completely different course in the near future. What do you think of this theory? Do you think that an African Pope is the leader that the Church needs in current times? Leave us your opinion in the comments and share it with others. In recent decades, prophecies and visions about the future of the Catholic Church have captured the attention not only of believers, but also of the media, religious experts, and a vast online community. This phenomenon has been amplified by the rise of social networks, where any revelation about the Pope, apocalyptic events, or the prophecies of Fatima quickly go viral. But how have these key players reacted to the resurgence of the Black Pope prophecy? This article seeks to explore the different perspectives on this issue, analyzing the reactions of the media, religious leaders, and the Catholic community in general. First, it is essential to understand what the Black Pope prophecy means. This prophecy, linked to the visions of the Virgin of Fatima, predicts that the Church will be governed by a Pope of African origin before the end of time. The interpretation of this prophecy has been the subject of controversy for decades, with some believers viewing it as a divine prediction, while others consider it a myth or a misinterpretation of the visions of Fatima. However, the resurgence of this prophecy, especially after the death of Pope Francis, has generated polarized reactions globally. One of the first responses to the rebirth of this prophecy came from traditional media. Newspapers and news programs at first treated the subject with skepticism, trying to demystify the prophecy and not give it a sensationalist approach. However, as more religious experts began to comment on the possible implications of Pope Francis' death and the election of his successor, the media began to cover the issue more prominently. Many of these reports focused on speculation about the future of the Church, citing ecclesiastical figures and theologians discussing the fulfillment of ancient predictions. For some, Francis's death represented an important turn in the history of the Church, a prelude to greater events that could be to come. The analysis of religious experts has been, without a doubt, one of the most significant reactions. Theologians, historians, and religious analysts began to offer their interpretations of the revival of the Black Pope prophecy, each providing their personal vision of how this prophecy fit in the context of current times. Some of these experts pointed out that the figure of the Pope of African origin could be interpreted as a sign of the social and political changes that the world is going through, highlighting how the Pope could represent a continent historically marginalized in the Church. Others, however, warned that the literal interpretation of the prophecy could be dangerous, as it could generate unnecessary tensions within the Catholic community, particularly regarding the racialization of the papal figure. One of the most unexpected reactions was that of the Catholic community, especially on social networks. As news about the possible appearance of an African pope began to circulate, digital platforms became a hive of opinions. On Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, Catholics around the world shared their views on the future of the Church and the interpretation of the Fatima prophecies. Some users were enthusiastic and saw the resurgence of prophecy as a sign of hope and renewal for the Church. Others, however, were deeply skeptical and concerned, warning that prophecy could be used manipulatively to shape the Church's narrative in the near future. This phenomenon also sparked renewed interest in more conservative groups within the Church. In many traditional Catholic forums and blogs, the validity of the prophecy and how it could affect the Church's relationship with its most faithful followers was discussed. Some saw the revival of prophecy as a threat to the stability and continuity of the Church, arguing that the figure of an African pope could upset the balance of power within the institution. Others, however, focused on the more positive aspects of the prophecy, noting that an African pope could be an answer to the social and political challenges of the African continent, and that his elevation to the See of Peter could be a sign that the Church is responding to the global needs of the 21st century. Video platforms also played a major role in the spread of the prophecy and the reactions to it. Videos on YouTube, many of which were made by Catholic communities or religious channels, offered various interpretations of the fulfillment of the prophecy. These videos, some deeply spiritual and others sensational, helped the topic spread rapidly, attracting thousands of people interested in discussing and debating the implications of the resurfacing of the Black Pope prophecy. On the other hand, the impact of social media has been instrumental in fostering an ongoing conversation about prophecy. Through hashtags such as Black Pope and Fatima, Catholics around the world shared their opinions on the future of the Church and how the figure of an African pope could transform it. Discussion groups on platforms like Reddit and Catholic faith forums became spaces where people shared theories, interpretations, and reflections on what this event would mean for the Church and the world at large. Meanwhile, the reactions of larger media outlets, such as CNN and BBC, were somewhat reserved, recognizing the interest that this topic generated without necessarily subscribing to a literal interpretation of the prophecy. However, as speculation increased, major news networks began to include interviews with religious experts and members of the Catholic Church, attempting to provide a more balanced view on the issue. In some cases, these interviews helped demystify the more sensational aspects of the prophecy, but they also opened space for a deeper analysis of the underlying theological issues. It's important to note that, although reactions have been mixed, the global impact of the resurgence of the Black Pope prophecy cannot be underestimated. In the contemporary world, where news spreads at an unprecedented speed and social media plays a crucial role in shaping public opinion, interest in topics such as this reflects a growing fascination with religious and apocalyptic issues. In fact, many of the followers of the predictions about the African Pope have linked this event to other apocalyptic events, creating a climate of widespread expectation and concern. Reactions from the media, experts, and the Catholic community have highlighted a fundamental point. The Black Pope prophecy remains a divisive issue. While some see it as a divine prophecy that will play a crucial role in the future of the Church, others believe it is a misinterpretation of the Fatima messages. Amid these reactions, one question remains unanswered. Will this prophecy be the harbinger of a momentous change in the Catholic Church, or simply another prediction that will be lost to time? What is indisputable is that as Pope Francis leaves his legacy, the world continues to search for answers and signs of what is to come. What do you think about the resurgence of this prophecy? Leave your comment below and share your thoughts. Throughout history, Marian prophecies have played a fundamental role in the spiritual lives of millions of Catholics around the world. These revelations, attributed to the Virgin Mary, have been seen as divine messages that invite us to reflect on the path of humanity, faith, and salvation. Although they have been widely discussed and sometimes questioned, Marian prophecies remain a source of hope and guidance for many, especially in times of global uncertainty. The Marian apparitions, which have occurred in various places around the world, have left messages that remain deeply relevant today. Places like Fatima, Lourdes, and Medjugorje are some of the best known, where thousands of people have come in search of comfort and answers to their concerns. In each of these places, the Virgin Mary has transmitted messages that, although they vary in details, have a common theme: the importance of prayer, conversion, and peace. In Fatima, for example, the Virgin Mary revealed a series of messages in 1917 to 3 shepherd children who would later be recognized as the visionaries of Fatima. One of the most famous messages was the prediction of World War II, as well as the call to conversion and penance as a means to avoid human suffering. Even though the war has passed, the Virgin's message remains relevant, especially in times of crisis. World peace, reconciliation between nations, and the conversion of hearts remain universal themes that resonate with those seeking an answer to the conflicts and challenges of the modern world. On the other hand, in Lourdes, the apparition of the Virgin Mary in 1858 to Bernadette Soubirous left a legacy of a message of hope, faith, and healing. The Virgin Mary revealed to Bernadette that she was the Immaculate Conception and asked that a chapel be built at that location. Since then, Lourdes has become one of the most important pilgrimage destinations, known for the healing miracles that have occurred there. In a world filled with disease and suffering, Lourdes' promise of physical and spiritual healing remains a ray of hope for those seeking relief. Medjugorje in the former Yugoslavia became a pilgrimage site when, in 1981, 6 young people claimed to have had apparitions of the Virgin Mary. Since then, Our Lady's messages in Medjugorje have emphasized themes such as peace, reconciliation, daily prayer, and returning to God. Although the Catholic Church has not yet officially recognized the Medjugorje apparitions, millions of people continue to travel there, seeking spiritual direction and strength in the midst of tribulations. The impact of these Marian prophecies and messages is not only limited to the apparitions themselves, but also extends to the teachings of the Catholic Church. The figure of the Virgin Mary as mediator and loving mother has been central to Marian devotion. Prayers like the Rosary, which focus on meditation on the mysteries of the lives of Jesus and Mary, have become a fundamental way to draw closer to God. Marian prophecies continue to inspire millions to pray and live according to Christian principles of love and sacrifice. However, today, Marian prophecies are not only related to religion in the strict sense. In an increasingly globalized world marked by political, economic, and social uncertainty, many see these messages as a sign of hope in the face of adversity. The Virgin Mary, with her messages of peace and love, has become a symbol of comfort for those facing the stresses and conflicts of the modern world. The global crisis we are experiencing, marked by pandemics, climate change, geopolitical tensions, and growing social polarization, has made many people look for answers outside of traditional solutions. In this context, the Marian prophecies offer a vision of hope, a reminder that despite the challenges of the world, there is always the possibility of finding solace and healing in faith. Additionally, Marian prophecies often call for conversion and repentance, two themes that come to the fore in times of crisis. The idea that, through repentance and returning to God, we can find peace and reconciliation resonates with those seeking a sense of purpose in the midst of chaos. In times of personal or collective hardship, the promises of the Virgin Mary offer a light in the darkness, a promise that divine love is always present, even in the darkest moments. Another important aspect of Marian prophecies is their ability to unite believers. Despite doctrinal differences and divisions within Christianity, the prophecies of the Virgin Mary have managed to bring together people from different traditions within the Catholic Church, as well as many other Christians, who see in Mary a figure who can overcome human divisions. Pilgrimages to places of Marian apparition have become moments of spiritual unity, where the faithful feel part of something bigger than themselves, sharing the same faith and the same purpose. In a world where people often feel isolated or disconnected, Marian prophecies offer a way to reconnect not only with God, but also with the community of believers. The hope they provide is a hope that transcends national and cultural boundaries, and that invites all to join in prayer for peace and conversion. Today, more than ever, Marian prophecies continue to be a source of hope for Catholics and many others seeking spiritual answers. In times of global uncertainty, these messages remind us that although the world may be plagued by conflict and hardship, faith, prayer, and repentance can always be the path to peace. If this topic has touched your heart, we invite you to comment on your opinion or personal experience related to Marian prophecies. What do you think about its influence today? The Catholic Church has gone through numerous changes over the centuries, but one of the most momentous moments has always been the transition between popes. The election of a new pope is not simply an administrative act, but a spiritual and symbolic event that marks the course of the Church and its faithful throughout the world. The figure of the pope is seen as the maximum authority in the Catholic faith, and his election is a moment that awakens great expectations in millions of people. In this sense, the papal future is a topic of great interest. The figure of the Pope has been the center of the ecclesiastical structure for centuries, and his leadership has had a profound impact on the doctrine, the decisions of the Church, and in many cases, the political and social life of the world. With the death of Pope Francis, which occurred in April 2025, a question arises: what will the next Pope be like, and what role will he play in such a changed world? This question, which transcends the merely ecclesiastical, touches on aspects of faith, politics, and the history of the Catholic Church itself. For the faithful, the election of a new pope is more than a simple administrative matter. It is an act of deep spirituality. The papal figure is seen as the successor of St. Peter, the first pope according to Catholic tradition. The belief that the pope is Christ's representative on earth carries with it a burden of hope, a hope that, in times of crisis, becomes the hope of finding spiritual leadership in times of confusion and difficulty. The Catholic Church, like many other institutions, finds itself at a crossroads. The social and political dynamics of the 21st century have put the Church before new challenges, from technological advances that question traditional morals and values to changes in global power dynamics that impact relationships between different sectors of society. In this context, the faithful wonder what kind of leader the Church needs in the future. The need for a pope who can not only spiritually guide Catholics, but also respond to the social and political demands of the modern world is more evident than ever. Looking back, we see that the faithful's expectations of the Pope have changed over time. In past times, the figure of the Pope was almost unquestionable. The faithful, for the most part, not only accepted papal authority, but revered it. However, in recent times, especially after scandals related to abuse within the Church and the crisis of faith that has been experienced in many parts of the world, the expectations of Catholics have evolved. It is no longer enough for a pope who limits himself to being a distant spiritual figure. The faithful look for a leader who is accessible, who is willing to listen, and who, above all, is an agent of change in a world that urgently needs transformation. One of the great concerns of the faithful today is the question of morality and the role of the Church in the modern world. Changes in social norms, struggles for human rights, and issues related to gender equality and sexuality have put the Church in a dilemma: how to maintain fidelity to traditional principles without losing relevance in an increasingly pluralistic and diverse society. The election of the next pope in this context will not only be a matter of faith, but also of politics and morality. The papal future is also conditioned by the need to strengthen unity within the Church. Over the centuries, the Catholic Church has witnessed numerous internal divisions, from schisms to doctrinal disagreements. In the present, globalization and the cultural diversity of Catholics have added a new dimension to these tensions. The faithful hope that the next pope will be able to maintain the unity of the Church in a world that seems increasingly divided. Globalization has brought with it an increase in interaction between Catholics from different regions of the world, which has raised new concerns and challenges that must be addressed by the Church hierarchy. At the same time, the evangelizing mission of the Church remains a priority. The Pope has a fundamental role in spreading the Christian message, especially in a world where secularization is increasingly prevalent. The faithful hope that the next pope will be able to connect with new generations, with young people who often feel disconnected from the institution. For many, this implies the need for a leader who is able to speak the language of young people and engage in the issues that affect them most, such as social justice, climate change, and economic equity. We cannot forget that the Catholic Church continues to be one of the most influential institutions in global politics. Throughout history, the Pope has played a significant role in mediating conflicts and promoting peace. In an increasingly polarized world, the faithful hope that the next pope will continue to play this role as a moral and political leader, capable of positively influencing international relations and government decisions. The papal figure continues to be one of the most heard voices in debates about peace, justice, and human rights. In this context, the election of a new pope will be a crucial moment not only for Catholics, but for the entire world. Expectations are high, and the faithful expect a leader who can not only preserve tradition, but also embrace the challenges of the future with wisdom and courage. Meanwhile, the future of the Catholic Church remains uncertain, but with hope that the next pope will be a beacon of light for Catholics around the world. What do you think about the papal future? What would you like the next pope to be like? Leave us your comment. The Black Pope prophecy is one of those mysteries that has captured the imagination of believers and skeptics alike. Throughout history, various prophecies have been made regarding the future of the Catholic Church, but few have had as much impact as those of the Virgin Mary at Fatima. His message, which includes the arrival of an African pope, has been interpreted in many ways, and today, more than ever, it becomes a crucial question of reflection. Over the years, faithful around the world have wondered if this figure, announced by the Virgin, will really be the one who will trigger the events that precede the end of time, as many believe. The term Black Pope does not refer to a pope with specific ethnic traits, but rather to deep symbolism. Some theologians believe that this title could refer to a pope who would lead in times of great tribulation for the Church. This figure would be a leader who would emerge in a time of global crisis and chaos, facing challenges that would test not only his faith, but also the very survival of the Church. The reference to black could be seen in metaphorical terms, representing darkness, suffering, or the adversity that the Church would face in these times. Over the centuries, the Church has faced seemingly insurmountable challenges, but it has always found a way to be reborn. From barbarian invasions in the Middle Ages to religious wars and modern crises, the Church has managed to overcome adversity. However, many of the Fatima prophecies suggest that the final crisis will be the deepest, perhaps the last test of Christian faith before an irreversible change in history. The Virgin Mary's message at Fatima also speaks of a time when humanity will face great trials, a time when faith will be tested in ways never seen before. And it is in that context that the figure of the Black Pope becomes relevant. This figure, as many interpret him, would be a pope destined to confront the forces of evil at their fullest, a leader who would guide the Church in a time of darkness and persecution. According to some interpretations, the arrival of this pope would mark the beginning of a new era, the final era in which the promises of Christ would be fulfilled. This pope, who could be the last, would have the monumental task of preparing the Church for the final days, while facing the shadows that stalk humanity. The events that would follow his choice could be disastrous, according to some interpretations, as they align with the concept of a final judgment, where the fight between good and evil would reach its climax. But how can we interpret these messages today, in the midst of a Church that faces unprecedented political, economic, and social challenges? The figure of the Black Pope is not only seen as an apocalyptic omen, but also as a symbol of resistance and faith. In times of despair, the Black Pope is expected to be a leader who guides the faithful towards salvation, strengthening the Church in its mission to keep the light of the Christian faith alive. The current Pope, Francis, has been a controversial figure, acclaimed by many but also criticized by others. Throughout his papacy, he has made efforts to reform the Church, challenging traditional structures and seeking a more inclusive Church. However, his pontificate has also been marked by internal divisions and external challenges, such as the rise of secularism and economic difficulties affecting the Church around the world. Some see these challenges as a prelude to things to come, a time when the Church could be closer to facing the darkness predicted in the prophecies. Some believe that Pope Francis is not the Black Pope of prophecy, but that he is paving the way for the arrival of this figure. In this interpretation, Pope Francis would be fulfilling a crucial role in the spiritual preparation of the world, facing difficulties with the hope that the arrival of this Pope of African origin would be the last step before the final restoration. Throughout history, Marian prophecies have been interpreted in various ways, and it has often been stated that the Virgin's messages are symbolic and should not be taken literally. However, the power of these prophecies lies in their ability to spark reflection and call to action. Today, the question about the figure of the Black Pope remains an open question, a mystery that does not have clear answers, but which continues to be part of the theological and prophetic discourse. Some experts suggest that the Black Pope prophecy could be a call to conversion and spiritual preparation. In a world filled with uncertainty and chaos, the arrival of this figure could be seen as a sign of hope, the last bastion of faith before the manifestation of apocalyptic events. Others, on the contrary, see in this prophecy a reminder of the need to be prepared for the unexpected without losing sight of fundamental Christian values. The mystery of the Black Pope's prophecy remains unsolved, but its impact on the faith and conscience of the faithful remains profound. Each of us must ask ourselves what this prophecy means in the context of our own lives and how we should respond to the times we are living in. Are we ready to face what is coming, or will we witness a world that changes before our eyes, leaving behind a church that did not know how to anticipate the future? We invite you to leave your opinion in the comments. What do you think about the Black Pope prophecy? Do you think it is related to the current events we are experiencing? We want to know your reflection.